On today's podcast, I'm just going to bribe you. Johnny and I, today's guest, he has a new book coming out. And this book is basically the roadmap for all you men out there to basically achieve everything you want in your life through so many powerful principles, routines, habits that we talk about on today's episode. And for the women, also helps you understand men, but also understand the masculine dynamics of business and also how to stretch and achieve your goals within business. It's this episode is like riddled with wisdom and knowledge. It's so good. And so Johnny and I decided in the middle of the show that when you're done listening to this episode, the first 50 of you to DM me your biggest takeaway, and the first 50 of you to DM Johnny your first takeaway on either side, we are each going to personally buy you a copy of his new book because we believe in it that much and it's so good. So today's episode, we talk about responsibility, accountability, handling emotions, how to be consistent, how to eliminate the hows in your life to achieve what you want, how to set dreams and change your state of being. Like this thing is like, I'm going to listen to it 3-4 times. So Johnny is one of the most incredible men I know. He's a man that I look up to for guidance and leadership, both for leading men and women, and myself included. And today's episode is loaded with nuggets. So without further ado, I'm going to recommend you get into the show. And I'm going to recommend when we get to our Instagrams, you write down the handles and you send a DM because a lot of people are going to be DMing. So make sure you get there. But without further ado, let's cue that beautiful intro of mine and let's get into the episode. Everybody, welcome back to another episode of the Mind of George show, which is probably going to start in a coughing fit. But either way, I am incredibly excited. I'm incredibly honored to be joined again today by one of my favorite human beings who's been on the pod before, who's been in our life, who's come to our events. And if you don't know him, the fuck are you doing? But I'll tell you how to find him. So here's how you find him. You pick up Webster's dictionary, you look up the word masculinity, and you open it. And there is a man in that photo, and that is Johnny, who is with us today, who happens to not only be the definition of that, but also he's back because he just wrote a playbook on how to become it. And I'm stoked because he's a man I love, I respect, I admire, I learn from daily. He's one of my closest friends that I have a soul connection with. So, Johnny, I am officially honored to welcome you back to the show.
I love you, brother. I appreciate you having me on the show and just seeing your face. Like, this is all worth it. We got to jam out for like 30 minutes before, and just being in your energy, even though it's virtually, like, I just always love it. So truly grateful for you, brother. Grateful to have you as a friend and a brother and to be on the show jamming out with you for a little bit.
Forever, my friend. So, for those of you, Johnny, because there are a few that apparently have been living under a rock, but for them, can you kind of paint a picture of the current Johnny, like what you do, what you focus on, what you help people with, like give everybody like the menu of Johnny, for lack of better terms.
Absolutely, brother. So I started robbing banks recently. That's been my profession
Yes,
for the last like year. Jesse
Johnny and
James
I.
is my
Jo- Yeah, Johnny and I had a particular set of skills that lend themselves well to the criminal world if we ever decide. So we have to be careful.
No, just joking. No, I'm, for a lack of better term, because I can't figure out how to classify this. I really am like a men's lifestyle optimization coach. And really is what we're doing is breaking apart men's lives, reprioritizing them, figuring out where the hangups are, where the struggles are, addressing that, and then getting them to be that, really not like the better version of themselves, but the desired version of themselves. Like, we're trying to help them to find
God, that's
that man
set.
they
Hold
authentically
on,
want to be.
Johnny, you got to stop
Yeah.
because you got to explain that because that is such a powerful, powerful statement that you just like so ever knowingly glossed over. Not who they should be, but who they desire to be. So let's just break that down,
Yeah.
Johnny.
Well, I mean, I guess it kind of leads itself into the book in general, which is Design the Man Within. But it's really to say, like, every guy, there's expectations from society on us as men, right? We can all agree to this. There's
Mm-hmm.
expectations ancestrally that have translated and carried forward, but not every man really resides in those definitions or expectations. A lot of men have a certain authentic proclivity to something or someone that they want to be, and in
Mm-hmm.
that is where they find their power in the man that they are. That's how they show up in confidence. That's how they show up in
Mm-hmm.
as great fathers or husbands, and how they show up as great men who are aligned in themselves and their actions and words. And so it's not about what people want us to be. It's not about the conditions of society, and it's not about what came before us. It's about what we feel right now we can embody as men, and authentically embody that individually. And I've found through hundreds of interviews, through coaching, through all of this stuff, that every man has a different set of masculinity traits that they reside with and feel authentic with. And
Mm-hmm.
in those traits, just because they don't line up with George or Johnny or somebody else doesn't make them wrong. It makes them
Yeah.
strong in who they are as a man and allows them to stand in that sovereignty. So that's really what I
Yeah.
mean by the man they desire to be.
Yeah, and I'm gonna add some flavor to that, Johnny, and get a little inclusive here as well. So first off, for everybody listening, Johnny's speaking through the lens of masculinity, right? But both men and women have masculinity and femininity. We have them both,
Absolutely.
right? And we get to dance with them both. And the reason I'm saying this is for all the ladies in the house, these things apply because every single ounce of entrepreneurship is masculine in its nature. And so a lot of these same thoughts and a lot of these same principles, they apply whether you're a man or a woman. And like, for example, uh, Johnny tends to default to his masculine body and energy in a situation where like I naturally default to my feminine body, right? And that's
Mm.
just like my natural state of being, right? Like that comes out of me first. And so for everybody listening, I just wanted to be inclusive of that as well, because this will apply whether you're a man or woman, and start to understand when we get into that. So that brings me to the second part, and I think this is a big part, Johnny, that is the undertone for me, is that there's this whole thing in life, but especially it's like hyper focused in entrepreneurship of like what you should be doing and what it should
Yeah.
look like, and how you should run your business and what somebody else said you should be doing. And should is shame, right? And when you said not like who you should be or can be, it's like who you desire to be. And I think that's one of the most powerful things for entrepreneurs or human beings in general to hear, is that this isn't about everybody else's measuring stick, it's about yours.
Yep. Yeah.
And so I just
Yeah.
wanted
And
to say
that's
that, Johnny, because I think it's huge.
No, that's beautiful, because I think it's stripped out of us when we're kids. Like, we're stripped out of this.
Yes.
This is why we lose creativity. This is why we lose
Yep.
dreams, right? Like, it's
Yep.
because it's stripped out of us as we're kids. And then we embody that as adults, and we embody it
Mm-hmm.
as male or female. We embody it as, entrepreneurs, or just, somebody who's the employee, the W-2 employee. Like, we embody that because it all gets stripped from us, and we get so fearful of being
Mm-hmm.
what we desire. We get so fearful of dreaming that all we
Yep.
think about are the things that could go wrong, or
Yep.
the way that we're going to be ostracized or kicked out of the community. Like, all we think about is the negative, and we say, well, that's going to be the prevailing theme for my life, so I'm just going to conform, and I'm going to do what is expected of me. I'll follow the boxes that are handed to me, and I'll just fit inside those nicely, and that's it, regardless of how it makes me feel, whether I'm happy or
Yep.
not, or whether I feel like I'm striving for a bigger goal, or in love with mediocrity. We just end up following suit, and then that's how we take on our lives. And it's, like I said, it's stripped when we're kids, and it doesn't matter what side you're on as far as male or female. It's stripped from both of us.
Yeah. You know how I like to like delineate my entire existence down to fortune cookies, because I only have three colors of crayons in my box, right? Because
Yeah,
I was a
right.
Marine. I was a Marine, and Johnny will make fun of me for days, and he totally can.
Yeah.
And just for the record, I understand that Marine stands for my ass rides in Navy equipment, sir, if you add Marines to the end.
Yeah. They Marines hate that.
I don't. Somebody has to drop us off to do the work.
Well, the funny thing is that Marines end up hating when you ask them where their budget comes from.
Yeah. Yeah. Oh, dude. I never cared either way. And like then when the Navy guys would pick on me, I'm like, well, all of us need moms to carpool us to school. So we'll go to work and then you come pick us up later. Okay.
So true. So
And
true. I
nobody
love
had a
that.
comeback for that one. Nobody.
Nope.
And they're like,
That's pretty solid, bro.
crap. And I was like, yeah, I won't play your game. So I just cut all the oxygen out straight from the get go. Right? It's the whole M&M approach. But here's what's funny about the fortune cookie analogy and what's so prevalent to what you're saying, Johnny, is that like entrepreneurship in its existence, like its beingness is building something for yourself that's never been built before. Right?
Yeah.
And what I find so funny, I remind myself of this that if I'm checking boxes, I'm building somebody else's vision. And if I'm making my own, I'm
Mm,
building mine. Right. And
yeah.
it's like
That's really
when you
good.
think about our careers, right? It's like I do an event because I got sick of going to events and not liking how they were. And I was like, well, I'll figure it out. Let's launch one. Right. And it's just this constant, like, okay, here we go. And so I just like, for me, I always remind myself that I should never get mad at the rules of the game that I'm choosing to play. Right.
Exactly. Yeah.
And so, like,
Yep.
just straight to the foundation, it's like we understand that when we give up a 9 to 5, we're giving up predictability in exchange for ambiguity that requires us to stretch and identify ourselves because we wanted that freedom and didn't want to be told what to do. But then we're the only one who can tell us what to do. And when it gets
Mm-hmm.
tainted, when the words like do this or be this or have that, what you end up is resenting your business and resenting your life. And you look at it, you're like, I don't know who this person is. And then the dissonance starts, and then the resentment starts,
Mm-hmm.
and then it starts to break and crack. And so it's really, really important. So I think it's a huge topic. So Johnny, now, just because I want to give some credibility and credence, and I won't make fun of you for, signing one of the better contracts because I think we both would have agreed at this point I should have joined the Coast Guard or the Air Force. Um, so irregardless, but can you kind of give everybody a little bit of your background? Because like what I love and respect about you is that you don't teach from something you read, you speak from experience. And I think
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
what's so
So,
powerful about you.
I appreciate that, brother. Really do. And so my background is, I was former special operations U.S. Army Ranger, and then I was also in a protective detail for the U.S. ambassador to Iraq for 5 years. I spent 10 years in and out of the Middle East on combat tours, and then doing protection, and lived that elite life being in special operations. Know what it's like being surrounded by a bunch of alpha males, like true alpha males, and
Yep.
living that high expectation of being on the edge. And then, that was kind of my pedigree. So I got into the military at 17 years old, and then I left the Middle East around 28.
Yep.
And that's kind of where I did a lot of my, I would say, young adult upbringing and learning. And that was really what conditioned the man that came back from all of that to interact with society. And I realized that in that there was a lot of good things that I was proud about that I could still be as a man. And I felt like there was a lot of things that were actually taking away from my happiness and taking away from my connection with my first wife, which we ended up getting a divorce with, the guys that were around me, where I was living in the DC area. I wasn't able to connect with those guys and create like actual lasting bonds. So it was this whole sense of being like, well, I've lost purpose because I don't have this flag behind me anymore to be my purpose. uh, and I've also lost this identity because a lot of what used to serve me is actually hurting me now. And
Mm-hmm.
so I had to come to a conversation with myself, like, what does that look like, dude? Like, if if it's not working right now, then I should probably do some changes. You know, the definition of insanity, doing the same thing over and over and expecting a different result. That's what I was sitting in, man. I was just like sitting
Mm-hmm.
there doing the same things over and over, but hoping things would get better. I was hoping my marriage wasn't going to end up in a divorce, but did I change anything? Did she change
Mm-hmm.
anything? No, we didn't. Neither of us did. So it
Mm-hmm.
ended up in a divorce. And then finally, when I got to that, point, I was drinking way too much. I was just living for the weekend. I had no ambitions. I had no projection of any goals. And I sat there and I thought to myself, I said, I'm super elite, bro. I've been at the top 1% of the US military. So this is going to go to one of two ways. I'm either going to become elite again in life and do something really good, or I'm going to become an elite piece of shit. It's going to be one or the
I
other. Like
know,
I'm going
I know,
to,
I know,
I'm
I
going to
know.
go one direction.
It's a slippery slope, bro. Because the moment
Ex-
it's like chutes and ladders, and if you start sliding down, you can become an elite asshole really fast.
Exactly. Elite asshole, really good at doing all the wrong things,
All the
making the
wrong things.
worst decisions.
Yep.
Like, I was like, oh, I'll be really good at it if I go that route, just like I'll be really good at anything else if I go the other way.
Uh huh.
And so, at least at the time, I had enough morals and ethics and understanding in who I was at the core that going the elite piece of shit was not a really good route for me. So
Mm-hmm.
I decided, hey, man, you got to do something different. So this is when my wife Taylor, at the time we were friends, she introduced me to a bodybuilding group, and I had always wanted to do bodybuilding. I've been lifting since I was 16 years old, and decided to go, hey man, I'm going to go do a show. And there was a local show being hosted by one of the most prominent all natural bodybuilders like on the planet, Philip Ricardo. And he
Mm-hmm.
was a friend of mine. He said, hey man, come do the show. So I said, all right, put myself in for it, trained for 4 months, got prepped, looked great, did the show. And that to me, and this is what I think is really paramount for everybody, if you can give yourself even a small goal, sometimes it can bring you back from the brink of disaster because it gives you hope again in some purpose, even if it's for a short period of time. Or
Mm-hmm.
what I would like to refer to is it gives you some passion for a short period of time. And so for me, that's what it did. It made me realize again, because there's not a lot of people that can go into bodybuilding and not a lot of people that can look the way I did going into bodybuilding. So I was like, cool, I proved that I could be at a high status again, and I needed that for myself. And then from there, it was just the continued climb out. Taylor tossed me my first self-development book. I naturally said, fuck off, I'm not
Yep.
reading this,
I
because
did
I
the
was like,
same thing. Yep. Yep.
I was like, what kind of man am I if I
Yep.
have to have other people tell me what kind of man
Yep.
to be?
Uh huh.
Re- Reluctantly, a few months later, I finally picked it up and read it. And I was like, oh, dude, I'm getting called out. I'm getting
This is why
called
we
out.
love each other so much. Like we are literally twins. Except yours
Yeah.
was a book and mine was a personal development course, which took her leaving me twice to then me get the hint and then sign up for the course, and then it was game over.
Yeah, man. And it for me, it was just like, oh crap. It was a punch in my stomach. I know you've read the book. It was
Yep.
Excuses Be Gone by Dr. Wayne Dyer. And Dr. Wayne Dyer, you know how he writes, dude. He's like a
Yep.
slap in the face, but it's really intelligent, right? So it's like
Of
it's slap
course,
in the
you
face,
can't
but
fight it.
no, you can't. You're like, oh, this is very logical. Okay, I see. I'm the problem.
It's like
And
my Navy
so
carpool mom analogy. You can't fight it.
Nope, you can't fight it. You can't resist. So that was it, man. That was the beginning of the end for me. I started to consume a bunch of self-development podcasts and other books. And we came up with the idea that, if I was struggling and I came with a lot of confidence in who I came from a very alpha background. I came from with all of this structure in what it was like to be a strong man. And I was struggling. I knew that a lot of my brothers were struggling. And I
Hmm.
was like, well, most men in this world, from the special operations community to the everyday average guy, they need one thing to start listening to you, and they need to respect you.
Yep.
And so we came up with me going into men's development work. We came up with me going into creating my own podcast that you've been on and crushed it. But we came up with all of that because it was all right, well, guys will respect my background enough to give me 5 minutes. And in 5 minutes, if I can help them have a better relationship with themselves or a better relationship with their family, or just simply look at the world a little more positively, that to me was worth its weight in, like, worth my weight in gold. And so that's why I started to embark on this. And now it's just, for 5 years now, it's been, this entrepreneurship's not easy. And
Hmm.
that's had its own struggles and my own introspections and reflections. But at the end of the day, it's really about making a difference with even one person. And that's kept me going. And it's starting to create a snowball effect of where I'm starting to see it kind of get bigger and bigger. And that's been really special.
Yeah, man, I wanna lead you with an undertone and kind of let you expand on it because you know, you were in for quite a long time in the middle of some shit. I was in for quite a long time, and I remember when I was in, like, from boot camp to like the fuck games to what we nicknamed the big green weenie at the time. I hated it and resented it, right? But when I look back, like, the number one thing that I remember is that the only reason we were elite was because we protected consistency over everything else. And it wasn't
Mm-hmm.
consistency of like climbing the mountain. It was like, what's the next bite? And it was just this
Yeah.
constant, like, environmental design from boot camp to operations where at every moment they put 100% ownership on you.
Mm-hmm.
And they said, you're in the middle of the shit and all of this has to be done, but taking no action is worse. And so the only thing you're forced to do is just find the next bite and figure it out. And like, I look back at like some of my biggest takeaways, and like in becoming elite, it's always been that consistency for me.
Yeah, it's consistency, but it's also consistency in the right thing. So for me, and this is
Yes.
why you and I think the same way, because I know where you're going with this, and
Yes.
you could have easily just written my book because you and I do think very similarly. We were joking about that, and and the thing is that, like, it's all about a foundation, right? Like, this is what made me elite. This is what made my brothers elite. This is what made you elite. This is what makes athletes elite, like the top 1% of professional athletes.
Mm-hmm.
It's literally pounding the foundations in so fucking hard that it doesn't matter what's going on in any
Yep.
scenario. They're so fine tuned that when you go back to that sympathetic nervous state and everything
Yep.
else shuts down, your cognitive ability to make these intricate and complex adjustments, everything you did was trained to such a high level on the basics that foundation will never let you down because it's
Never.
built out of the strongest things. And you and I, again, just your life in general, what you and I have been talking about a little before the show,
Mm-hmm.
everything that's happening right now with you is because you're where you are right now because your foundation is so strong. Most men would
1000%.
never be even close to where you are right now. Like, this, I know
Mm-hmm.
this, it would be completely different thing. But you are where you are because of the foundation that you've consistently built in your life. And
Mm-hmm.
that goes for everybody. Like, if you can get the basics right and you keep training on the basics over and over again, entrepreneurship, like, you do this in your business. I've seen you do it with your lighthouse. Like, you train the basics so hard that it's like, if somebody just follows your program and what you're doing on the basics, they will never fail, because
Nope.
when everything else falls apart,
Yep.
they will have the basics so strong that foundation will be impenetrable. And
Yep.
that's the difference, and that's what I teach on. That's what I love teaching on, because I'm like, listen, it's not rocket science. I don't need to give you complexity. I need to get you to be so good at all the base things that
Yep.
everything else, it doesn't matter what comes your way ever. And so that's where I
I
just,
I tell
that's for me is so
I tell
important.
I tell everybody they'll know they're successful when they're bored of their monotonous behaviors that are working.
Yeah, that's a really good one.
That's
That's
it.
really good.
Like, as much as
Yep.
we hate it, right? We both run podcasts, no matter how hard it is, no matter what my day is, no matter what thing is. Like, we both understand if we don't hit record and publish, nothing can change, right? And so,
Right.
irregardless, it requires us that we put that step out there. And so, it's just
Hmm.
something I think about all the time because what you said, man, like 1000%. But what I think about is like, I think about all the massive trauma we've both seen, right, and experienced in our life, right?
Mm-hmm.
And
Yeah.
I feel like it gives us great capacity and range. And there's a part of trauma work where you work through it, you have an awareness of it, but sometimes it never goes away, right? And those moments
Right.
can creep in and they can get there. And what I realized is that, what you're talking about is like you have to lay a foundation, you have to lay a blueprint. I've always struggled with vision, right? Like I've never been a vision board guy, I've never been a write my goals out guy. I'm kinda, can I just build it brick by brick? But I was losing because the only thing I didn't ask myself is like, do I have a general idea of what I want it to look
Yeah.
like, which is what you're talking about, right? And so what I do
Mm-hmm.
now, Johnny, is I play the long game and short game on myself. So I have two
Mm.
sets of habits and rituals every day. So I have my baseline, which is the long game, right? Which is, hey, if I think about the man I want to be in 10 years, what does he look like? What does he think like? What does he act like? What does he feel like? What are his behaviors? And I'm like, cool. What are three things that I could do every single day for the next 5 years that if I did them consistently, they would equal that man? Right. And so that's my
Mm-hmm.
long game. And so that's in place for when like the business world is exploding, my personal world is exploding. So I still have that bite to take. And then I have the short game, which is the same model, but in the business. And so
Mm-hmm.
that's how I play it because I feel like as long as I'm like, all right, cool, I want to build a house. If I at least pick the state, I can start gathering materials because now I know at least an area. And then as I get deeper in, I'm like, oh, I'm going to this area. Oh, I'm going to this neighborhood, right? And then it iterates as it goes. So that's how I've kind of carried it over.
Yeah, and that's perfectly said because you can't like it. You what I have found in my life is you cannot get complex in anything,
Hmm.
whether it's your personal life or your business
Hmm.
or on a mission. You can't get complex when
Hmm.
everything below that complexity is built on fragility.
Hmm.
And that's where I see a lot of people today is either they don't have awareness of what that foundation is and who they are or what they've built their business on, and
Yep.
you've seen the business side
Oh
way
yeah.
more than I have,
Yep.
and those businesses will inevitably crumble, or they'll get to a point where they actually grow but there is nothing sustaining it together, so long-term growth is never going to be achieved,
And I'll
right?
tell you why in a
And
minute.
yeah, and that's just in personally, it's the same thing. You can't get complex in your life
Hmm.
and manage a lot of different things to get creative and to find these bigger goals and awareness of where you want to go. If your foundation, you don't know who you are, if you don't know what you stand for,
Yep.
you know?
1000%. So here's what it is, Johnny. And you actually, I'm gonna do a callback to what you said in the beginning when you were talking about your story and losing your identity when you walked away from the flag. Because
Yeah.
in knowing you personally, you borrowed that identity to figure out who you were to then start developing your own identity, being willing to adjust
Mm,
it, right? For
yeah.
entrepreneurs, what you're talking about, what ends up happening is they always lose when they become or they identify as their business because then they're only
Mm,
looking at the decisions and the behaviors through an intrapersonal lens rather than this is a thing that I do. This is a business that I run. This is
yeah.
how I'm doing it, right? And I see it across the board. The moment they're like, "Oh, I can't do," and they're taking it personal, like they're overwhelmed. Like that is what creates all that cloudiness, and you get stuck in the cyclic washing machine. And then all you start looking
Hmm.
for is more and more holes because your sympathetic nervous system is tuned in to now trauma. And so it's trying to protect itself. So it's like, well, this is broken, and this is broken, and this is broken, and this is broken. And then instead of us as entrepreneurs, like, oh, well, this isn't working in the business and this isn't working, what do we say? I'm failing.
Hmm.
I'm not good enough. I can't figure this out. Why did I start this in the first place when we're actually in the middle of a game and we're winning? We just lost
Hmm.
perspective on the game that we're playing. And then that cycle just repeats and it repeats
Yeah.
and it repeats. And so, especially for personal brands, right? Like this was the hardest part for me for years was like realizing that like I am the brand, but at the same time, I'm not.
Yeah. Yeah, it's
right?
almost like you're the face of the brand, but like you yourself aren't the brand.
Yeah, it's a weird paradox, man. It's a weird paradox.
Well, but you see it. This is the same conversation that people are should be having that are in W-2 jobs and stuff.
Mm-hmm.
Like
Mm-hmm.
if you know this, you go and talk to them. Hey, George, nice to meet you, man. First thing I ask, what do you do? And then people literally, it's
Yep.
just this conversational piece, and you're like, bro, you've just literally made it normal for people to be pigeonholed by what they do because
Yep.
now they're defined by that. And then people have accepted
Yep.
that their definition of who they are is whatever job they do. Their value for themselves is whatever
Yes.
job they do. And then you're like, bro, this is terrible. It's the same thing. We see it with politics right now.
Yep.
Politics is insane.
Yep.
It's like you can't even be an individual separated from politics. Like your politics define who you are at this point in the
Yep.
US. And you're
Yep.
like, this is ridiculous.
Yep. Yeah, dude, it's crazy because the part of it too is like what ends up happening, and you said this earlier, is that when you start getting triggered or you're in that place of like, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying to figure it out, I'm trying to figure it out. At any moment when your sympathetic nervous system is triggered, right? When you're in fight or flight or you're having an emotional trigger and response, the only thing you can see is what you currently know under restraint, right? And in order to
Mm-hmm.
grow, what we need to find is like the one bite ahead of us, right? Like that one next bite over and over and over again. So you have to, like, you've been talking about this the whole time, is you're like, what's that one next stretch? Like, what's that one next behavior? What's that
Yeah.
one next thing that, we're going to focus on? Because, what it took me years to understand is that I would get faced with a challenge and then I would address the challenge and then it would come back eventually. And I realized that I was addressing the challenge on the same field that I created it on. And in order for
Yeah.
that to change, I couldn't change the behavior. I had to change, I couldn't change like the to-do list. I had to change my belief in my behavior. Right. And
Mm-hmm.
then I had to let everything else trickle underneath that. And that's been probably like the biggest muscle for me, is like recognizing like when I'm triggered and when I'm like, oh my God, this isn't working, boom, 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 boom. Like that is my number one red flag that like I need to get out. Like I'm not solving a problem, I'm not solving a challenge, I'm not, because like in NLP, like I'm stuck at the level where the challenge is and I have to change the
Yeah.
level to do it, right? And so that's where you start to stretch and you start to ask questions. I'm like, all right, cool. Well, what would it look like if I was running a business that was 10% higher? What would it look like
Mm-hmm.
if I had an employee, even though I don't have them? And you start to ask the like, what would or what could, not what can. Because can is that trigger. It's like that's limited to what you currently know, which you
Yeah.
said is the definition of insanity, right? And
Yeah.
it's like if you run a mile at the same pace every day for a year, you will get weaker because your body will become accustomed to it and it will atrophy because it will become your new baseline, right? So we celebrate
Yeah.
this in working out. When we're in the middle of a run and we committed to 3 miles and we're at 2.5, and we're like, I want to quit, I'm dying. You're like, no, I'm so close. And then you look at the pain and you're like, I'm growing, I'm growing. But yet
Yeah.
when we come to the game of entrepreneurship, which is like one of the greatest professional sports of all time, which
Yeah.
requires like one of the greatest games of athletes, we're consistently met with the, I don't want to feel anything, I don't want to stretch, I just want it to be easy. And then we get upset that it stagnates. We get upset that it stays
Yeah.
the same, right? And so it's just like crazy dance.
Yeah. And we do it in life too. Like you said, we know it in the gym, but we'll sit in life knowing this and we'll still do the same thing. Like we won't actually look to be like, oh, the pain is the growth, or like this hardship is the growth. We'll be just like, I'm gonna quit. This sucks. I'm done. I'm gonna go
Yeah.
back to my 9 to 5. I'm done with entrepreneurship. This is stupid.
Yeah.
Like, and people run away or their business fails and then they don't do any. It's just we know the answer, yet we will only apply it in certain aspects of our lives. And one of the things I wanted to bring us back to too, because I loved what you said about the trauma and how it doesn't always get healed. I know I'm taking us on back on a little bit of a
I
tangent,
love it.
but I wanted to readdress this because the fact that especially my personal opinion is when it comes to men, they have a hard time dealing with trauma because one, if we admit we have trauma, we are basically admitting that we're weak, right?
Well,
Is
that's the
what we have been
belief.
taught.
Yeah, that's what we've been
Right.
taught.
That's what we're
Yeah.
taught. This is what we've been taught, right? So like, all right, we're weak, so we can't admit trauma. But then when a guy does get to that point where he admits that there's trauma and there admits that there's some things that aren't going well and he needs to work on them, he imagines that because we're problem solvers, and this is why I think it applies a lot to men, because women don't have necessarily that proclivity to always have to solve a problem. The guy's like, if I'm going to take this on, I'm going to solve it and it's got to be accomplished, right?
Yeah, yeah,
And then you said something that I loved, which was like, hey, you could acknowledge it, you could interact with it, you could come to a point where you've learned how to navigate it and balance your life, but it may never go away.
exactly.
And this is what's important to me, though, is the foundations are going to give you the tools, so when it doesn't go away, you just are like, cool, this sucks, I know I'm experiencing again, I have it, but let me go ahead into my toolbox and fix this and go
Exactly.
back to something
I'm
else.
going to give a pragmatic example, Johnny, because this one is on my plate this week twice, right? So, like a
Yeah.
pragmatic example, and we'll summarize this down to a metaphor, and we'll thank Mike Tyson for this, right? He says everybody has a plan until they get punched in the face, right?
Right. Yeah.
Until you know you're going to get punched in the face, and then
Yep.
you can make an adjustment. You can make, a call. You can make all of that stuff. Uh, God, I lost my fucking train of thought. That was hilarious. What did you
So
say right
good.
before that?
It was just talking about how we can dip back into our tools even when we
Oh, with trauma.
re-experience
Oh, so here,
trauma.
yeah. So
Yeah.
here's the thing. So here's the tangible example. Have you ever let an employee go?
Yeah, we have.
Have you ever written an adverse fit rep or thing for a soldier underneath you?
Uh, yeah.
Okay. More than once, right?
One. No, for the soldier thing once. Yeah.
Okay. What about firing people? More than once?
Yeah.
Okay. It never feels easier.
No.
But the more we do it, the more we become aware that that feeling is going to be there, but then I'm aware of it so I can choose a behavior that mitigates damage.
Mm-hmm.
So that's like a pragmatic example of it, right? Because we think about those
Yeah.
moments and that's what it looks like, because that's an easy one. That might be associated with trauma or trigger, but then it's the same point of like, hey, you'll get to a point where you're in the middle of a workout and you literally feel like you have nothing left. And you're like, nope, one more bite, one more bite. But the feeling in your body is telling you, I can't do this. You shouldn't go anymore. You can't. But you acknowledge that the feeling is there, and then you choose an action aligned with who you want to be, not who you currently are. So, what I find
Mm-hmm.
so interesting is like how many people in my life check me on my bullshit because I do it everywhere else. And it wasn't until my friends held me accountable, like, why don't you do the same thing in the business? Like, why avoid the hard conversations? You know they're going
Mm-hmm.
to happen. And the more you use it, the more you practice it, the more consistent you are with it, either the more dissipated the feeling becomes or the more aware you are with it, and you can operate clearly in front of it, which is what we were trained our whole life. And the reason we
Mm-hmm.
drill the basics so fucking much is because we drill it so when we lose the ability to think, that our body
Yeah.
still does the behavior, which brings us back into the clarity thinking, which allows us to continue. And so
Yep.
I look at these things of like these conversations of like how many times in my previous careers I put off like, oh my God, I know I have to let this client go, or I know it's not a good fit, but I'll ride it out for 3 months, right? Like, and every one of those always led to pain. And then it
Mm-hmm.
took years to recognize that the moment I saw it, the faster I addressed it, the faster both of us won. But it was a comfort zone, right? Like there was a muscle of like, okay, I'm a little bit more confident. I'm a little bit more confident. Now I'm a little bit more confident. And now I'm at the point where I tell people it before we ever work together because I'm so fucking clear.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
it's taken, 10 years of just choose it, choose it, choose it, choose it, choose it, choose it, choose it
Yeah.
to now where it feels easy. So like for everybody listening, man, woman, it doesn't matter. Like the pragmatic approach
Alien.
to this is that you alien like me, like whatever. I'm like an octopus. Like I don't share DNA with anything else on this planet. The octopus is the only other thing that has that. So I was like, I'll be an octopus today. That's what it feels like most of the time. But like what I think, for me, Johnny, is like when I think back on our careers and what we were really trained to, is the reason those basics were drilled is because when we got so triggered or we're in the middle of a firefight or our buddy got killed, the default behavior would take over, and that's what would bring us back into the present moment and back into perspective. But without
Mhm.
it, we'd be stuck and triggered. And so I think about it the same way in entrepreneurship. Like literally, the more we practice those hard conversations or running to the check engine lights, because what are triggers in business are holes that your body is telling you need to be addressed in order for your business to work, right? And
Yeah.
the more we're willing to like find it and look at it and find it and look at it, it becomes a conditioned response that when you lose your number one client 5 years from now versus now you go into panic. Oh my God, my life is over. 5 years from now, you're like, oh, I knew this was coming. I do this, boom, it's game over. But it's the more that you're willing to flex it and stretch it and play with it, like the more effective you become at using it.
Absolutely. And it's also just, I mean, for everybody listening right now, just resign to the fact that nothing is ever going to happen on time or in a good time.
Nope.
And that's kind of like that's like literally what I see people struggle with the most. And I've had that conversation as an entrepreneur, like, oh man, it would be this will be a good time for me to do that, or this magical time will be a better time for that to happen. And then I'm like, but why?
Yeah.
But why do we wait for this stuff? And kind of to your conversation, what you were just pointing to, it's like they won't have those conversations because the fact that they'll wait till their back's against the wall. Right. And so what you did was you were like, well, I didn't like my back against the wall to have the conversation. So how can I get a little bit ahead of that? And then
Mm-hmm.
you're like, then how can I get a little bit ahead of that? And then how
Mm-hmm.
can I get a little bit ahead? And then you're like, well, how can I just cut this off altogether and
Yep.
preemptively attack it so it doesn't even show up? But like you said, it came with flexing that muscle. We are so connected to only flexing the muscle out of necessity that we will wait till we are at rock bottom. We will wait till our back is against the wall. We'll wait till everybody has left our corner before we decide to make a decision to do something different or to have that hard conversation. Instead of being like, well, I don't really like being in that position, being forced to have to climb out of this hole. Maybe I can just step foot a little forward and kind of cut that path off. And
Mm-hmm.
that's what, for me, that has been a big learning curve in entrepreneurship, because the fact that I'll be like, okay, I'll do this when I get to the point that I need it. And it's like, well, if I actually stood it up right now, by the
Yep.
time I need it,
Yep.
it'll be in such a better place that it might just need some minor adjustments. Right. And so
Yeah. I got
that's
like
the conversation.
I got like 3 notes, so I don't lose them because I'm going to lose them.
Yeah.
I'm not losing them. So
Go.
number one, on what you just said, the toxic thinking of like, I'll start this when. Uh, my buddy Jamie Smart, who's been on the podcast, wrote a book called The Little Book of Clarity, and it's like a 3-hour read, and it literally eradicates toxic thinking. I'll start this on Monday. I'll do
Yeah.
it on the new year, right? So everybody read that book. Johnny, the other thing that I laugh about, and this is a reminder that I've been reflecting on and giggling on lately, is that I told the universe what I wanted, but I have no right to question the path that gets me there.
Yeah. That's a good one.
And so the how and the why
Yep.
is the how is for me to execute, but the why doesn't matter because any moment I'm thinking about why is preventing me from putting a brick in the ground. And
Mm-hmm.
so it's just this constant reminder. I'm like, oh, yep, this is one of those things. I'm like, there's a lesson. I didn't want this to be a part of the path, but it is a part of the path, right? And the more
Yeah.
you go towards it, I just feel like the more comfortable you get. Like you just start to eat it. And like you think about how life is delineated. How many books have been written about eating the frog? How many different
Mm-hmm.
ways has it been said? How many fortune cookies? How many quotes? How many metaphors? And yet it takes us until we're fucking 40 years old for me to be like, oh my God, if I just listened to this 20 years ago, I'd be a
Yep.
fucking trillionaire, right? And it's like, if there's hard things, right? Like even Dave Ramsey turned this into money. Pay off the biggest bill first and let it waterfall down. Eat the frog.
Yeah.
Do the hardest thing first, let it waterfall down. Every self-help book, every discipline book. But yet the area where we get to practice and flex the muscle the most is the one that we ignore. We put off the hard conversations, the things that we don't want to talk about. But it's a game of frequency. So the more you practice it in one
Mhm.
bucket, the more it delineates out into every bucket.
Yeah. And you know, this was another thing that I had to come to terms with, because like you and I, having similar backgrounds, both struggled probably with this how and why.
Yes.
And that, like, I literally have a piece of paper up on my board over there that says forget how. Because what you're going to do is, like, you know, you're going to take that brick, you're going to say, okay, I want to get here. You're going to have a dream, and you're going to be like, this is what I want to do. This is what I want to be. This is how I want to be seen. And I want to have a business that does this. And then you're going to take this brick, and that brick that you put in the spot to start building your way to that path to that, is only going to be a brick that you know exists. It's
Mm-hmm.
only going to be something that you've ever experienced. So what I started to realize was, I was like, hey, Johnny, how much experience do you have being an entrepreneur? Yeah, fucking none, bro. So guess what? You're going to start putting bricks in from no experience of being an entrepreneur. And
Right.
guess where that path is going to get you? It's going to get you in a circle that's literally just walking right around exactly where you are. And I was like, oh, every time I thought to myself, this is what I want my business to be doing, and I started said, but how does it get there? I had to stop myself from asking how, because like you said, I didn't have the right to ask the universe for this and then be like, okay, but then let me interject how I think I should get there based on zero experience on how to do this, right?
Yep.
And then also, you don't leave any room for magic in your life, for things to come in that are completely unexpected. Like an introduction to George Bryant, who becomes one of my closest friends. Like, I could have never known a George Bryant existed. I didn't know this. And I think actually it came through, was it Anthony Trucks
It
introduced
was.
us, or
It was
somebody?
Anthony. Yeah, it was.
Yeah. And it was like, wow, like this is amazing. And I never knew that you existed. I never knew what kind of background you had. And guess what? I was starting on an entrepreneurial journey. And then what did George do? Being George who he is, gave me the kitchen sink of everything he knows about business, and freaking gave me all this stuff. And I was like, Jesus Christ. And it helped so much. But that is the magic that we get to play in if
Yep.
we just open up our eyes. And if you said, Johnny, if you played this clip back and for me 5 years ago, and I'd be like, who the fuck is this clown talking about universe and like playing and magic? Like, I would have been like, hell no, bro, this dude's crazy.
Facts.
But that's literally the life that we get to have if we just are open to that opportunity of it, the magic happening, when we
Mm-hmm.
start to release the how and the why, and we just ask and we look at what we would desire and then leave it out in the universe, and then just go back to doing the things that are going to solidify our foundations that we can build complexity on. That way, when things come in, when that magic comes in, you're prepared for it, right?
Yep. Yep.
You know, I love the saying,
Yep.
there's no such thing as luck.
Nope.
Luck is just when preparation and opportunity meet.
Yep.
And that, to me, it epitomizes what life should be about, is being prepared and then allowing opportunities to
Yep.
come in.
And
And
I
when
want
that
to get
happens,
yeah.
that's
And
the magic.
I want to give a huge thought on this because it's such a powerful point, Johnny. So I want to give some pragmaticness, or whatever that word is. That's probably the wrong fucking word. I just make words up
I'm
and
pretty sure you
pretend
just
to know
made
what
that
I
one
mean.
up.
Well, I know that's a word, but I literally probably 10% of my day used words out of context with the wrong meaning, and I don't know until somebody checks me. And then I'm like, oh yeah, that is not what I thought that meant. Okay, I'm an idiot. Those last 30 podcasts, I sounded like a clown. Okay, cool. Yeah, totally. But to take this approach of like, I want to explain what you mean, or what I interpret in my lens when you say letting go of the how. Okay, how
Yeah.
I interpret that now through my lens is that the reason I used to ask how was because I thought there was only one right way.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I was asking how, I was like, oh my God, there's got to be a way. And that prevented me from learning the way, because when I released the how, I was like, oh, I have to figure it out. So I was able to take a lot more swings. And I'm like, oh, this worked. This didn't. Okay, let's keep this. Let's not do that again. Right. And it's like the how, you can't build a home before you have blueprints. But if you've ever watched or built a home, you'll have blueprints that look beautiful on paper. And then the moment the foundation is laid, they're like, hey, we got to move this. We got to tweak this. We got to go.
Mm-hmm.
And so when I say to people, I won't ever ask or answer how, it's not because there isn't a how, but there isn't anybody who can tell you your how, because
Right.
you'll pick up the
Yeah.
science, right? You'll pick up the skills, but your expression of them, that's your 20% of your uniqueness and your personality. And so the reason I teach the science is because if I teach you the science, then the art is up to you, right? But we have to
Mm-hmm.
take the same thing and apply it into our business. It's like, hey, Johnny and I might be like, hey, here's how we built our vision. These are the things that we
Yeah.
thought about, but that might not work for you, but you can take the same principles and do it your way. So for people,
Mm-hmm.
like, I know people that love putting magazines and cutouts on their wall and calling it a vision board, right? And that's one way. But then I
Yeah.
have clients who make a mind movie that has music
Yeah.
and pictures and they play that every day, right? We're accomplishing the same thing. But when you're willing to say, not how should this be done or how would this be done perfectly, it's like, okay, what are the principles I need to carry, but how do I want to apply them? And then the more you practice that and the more you try it, you
Mm-hmm.
send DMs, you send messages, you get on calls, you try this, the more swings you take, the faster you learn which ones to swing at and which ones not to. And so
Yeah.
it's just like swing, swing, swing. So I wanted to say that for me, because for years I was always the how. And Lindsay,
Oh yeah.
my fucking best friend and queen and goddess in my life, um, used to ask me one question that would break me. And I would literally be stuck, and she'd be like, "What are you pretending not to know, or what are you pretending not to see?" And she would
Mm-hmm.
never answer my question, ever. She would
Yeah.
guide me, she would embait me, she would just send me back with that. And then every time I'm like, God damn, oh man,
Yeah.
right? And it starts to be like, okay, cool. And so it's just these perspective shifts. But I think there's just these are such powerful principles that, Johnny, are for me, the things that you're talking about speak to the reason you're the man you are and the position you are. And I feel like even the undertone of this whole podcast is like, you're guaranteed to win if you always protect the basics.
Yeah.
Like that's
100%.
that's it's so huge. It's so huge. So I do have a question though, because you alluded to this earlier and I want to hear your thoughts. So you were talking about
Yeah.
earlier, you kind of need like a blueprint or you need a frame, right? To weigh those behaviors about, right? And one of the things
Yep.
that was basically trained out of us was dreaming, right? Like when we were
Mm-hmm.
kids, when we were 5, if you asked me what I wanted to be, I said it and I actually believed it was 100% possible, right?
Yeah.
And it's been trained out of us with paradigm and wounds and trauma and society and everything. And so, like, what's the first step for somebody even giving themselves permission or starting to dream, to know, or even start to get that picture of clarity?
I would my personal opinion to this. I know you got some great perspectives on this. My personal opinion for this is to let it sound ridiculous, to laugh at it and even
Yes.
think it's stupid,
Yes.
because you don't fight what's already been built into you by society. Allow that to come out. But as we've talked about, if you put it out, if you say it and you continually say it, you're going to start believing in it.
Yep.
And that's the thing. It's like what is the, I can't remember who said it, but if you tell a lie long enough, it becomes a truth,
Yep.
right? And so, like, this can be used for very insidious things, by the way. So
Welcome to
psychological
politics in 2023 on both sides. On both sides.
Exactly.
Like, let's just be
Exactly.
clear. Like,
Exactly.
yeah, hello media.
Yep. Yeah, hello media. But that's really what it is. If we can play that game with ourselves when it comes to our dreams, let it sound ridiculous,
Mm-hmm.
laugh at it, think it's stupid, but don't stop saying it to yourself. Don't not write it down
Yep.
in your journal every morning.
Yep.
Don't allow yourself to say, I'm never going to think about it again.
Yep.
Allow yourself to constantly think about it, and don't worry about the how, but just allow it to soak in, and don't be afraid, and don't be put off that you are going to think it's ridiculous.
Yeah.
Like you just have to accept that.
Yeah, and Johnny, I got a note on this one too because I love this, and I'm gonna take the oxygen out of everybody's fucking objections right now. Okay.
Normal,
Uh,
normal.
yeah, it's my preferred method. And then I fucking forgot my thought again. I'm off today. I am
You're gonna
off.
take the wind out of their sails about the dream, about their new dream, or about the dreaming again.
Yeah, yeah. Oh, dreaming about dreaming again. So first, I did an entire podcast on this called Dreamstorming, and I highly, highly recommend it. But let me tell you why this works. Okay, so people have said for years like manifestation's a joke and all that stuff, but we've heard for years like fake it till you make it. But my dear friend Sharon Lechter, who's she wrote Napoleon Hill's book Outwitting the Devil. So she's the one who wrote it and took the manuscript and wrote it. She's incredible, and she
Amazing.
teaches this concept of thoughts. Your thoughts equal your words, which then dictate your actions, right? And so I'll
Yeah.
use money as an example. So if you're making $1 million a year, right, the frequency that you see every day is $1 million. Like you see the world through $1 million lens. Like that just happens to
Yeah.
be the radio station that you're in. But the way that the dreams work, and like you said, being ridiculous, and like you might literally be like, okay, I want to be doing $10 million a year. And you say it and you say it. And the more you say it, what it does is it slightly adjusts your frequency knob. And it's not going to tell you, here's the 10 next things to get to 10 million. It's going to say, hey, you need to do this different to get to 1.3. And then when you
Mm-hmm.
look again, because you're saying it and you're just tuning your frequency into divergent thinking, right? It's going
Mm-hmm.
from convergent to like what I know to like divergent of like, oh, what could be there? And then you're finding the
Yeah.
dials and you're tuning them. And so like I'm bullish on environmental design. I'm bullish, like there's 100 lighthouses in my office. You know, I'm bullish on
Mm-hmm.
setting my goals and my things around me, because it's not that it gives me a path, but it changes my thinking from, okay, well, how I'm currently doing it got me here, and I couldn't think about it differently, but now I'm like, I want to do 10 million a year. I want to do 10 million a year. I start to look at it differently, and I'll start to
Mm-hmm.
see opportunity. And so for everybody like listening and thinking about this, like when Johnny says like dream big, whether that's reading Vivid Vision by Cameron Herold and grabbing Johnny's new book and putting it into practice, whether that's sitting down and picking a bucket of like, God, if I could design my day 10 years in the future, what would my dream day look like? Or if
Yeah.
I could design a family vacation a year from now, what would it look like? And you might not get that, but that family vacation might mean you need to take 3 weeks off that you've never taken off before. So now that
Mm-hmm.
gives you a goal. And you're like, oh, well, how would I start buying that time back? And so what you're doing by setting your intentions is you're increasing your paradigm. So like your belief system is stretching, and then you're going to start to notice things, see things differently, and ask questions, because you're tuning your brain into a bigger level, which is going from what do I know to what could I know. And that's where the
Mm-hmm.
clarity comes.
And it that is so beautiful, bro. And another like application to this, I'll give a real life experience for me when I just started down all this path, was that I was doing my government job and I had started the podcast. I've been doing the podcast for maybe like 6 months or 8 months or something like that. And I didn't really have guests. Nobody knew who I was. I was having to go find people, all this stuff. And I was like, man, I really want people to reach out to me about being a guest on the show. Like, I don't know who to go to. I don't know anybody in the environment. I don't know really, like, I'm still trying to figure out my way, all this stuff. So I sat there and I said, hey, let me just change one habit in my life. I was like, what do I do every night? I sit down and I'll finish at the gym. I'll get home. I'll take a shower. I'll cook. And then I'll sit down and watch like a 30-minute show with my
Yep.
wife. Right.
Yep.
And I was like, actually, she was way smarter than me. She was listening to podcasts and books and everything. I was like being an idiot, and I'd sit down and watch a TV show. And then I'd get up, and then like every day, everything was the same. And I was like, okay, nothing new is entering my life. And I'm going to tie this back to what we're talking
Yeah.
about having having these unexpected things come in your life. I was like, let me change one thing. I stopped doing that. I started listening to podcasts every single night, educational, informational podcasts that I enjoyed on things that I really enjoyed. There's no purpose to it other than I just enjoyed the content. All of a sudden, and I shit you not, George, within, I think it was about 2 or 3 days, people, and this happened every single day afterward, people started reaching out to me to be on the show. All I asked was I wanted people to be on the show. I didn't ask how. I didn't know how. I didn't know why. I knew why, other than just the fact that I needed more guests, but I didn't know how anything was going to happen. And I would get random people who fit what I was looking to do for the podcast perfectly. And I was like, what in the heck is going on? And it was literally just that one thing, but it was relieving myself of trying to ask that how. And it was relieving myself of trying to figure out all the things to do to get to
Yeah.
that point. So
Yeah. And
to re-solidify
I'm
all
going to
that.
add more evidence for everybody wondering so I can dissipate the sales a little bit more. And then we'll talk about where to get your book, Johnny, because we'll have to do the next one in person. We're going to have to part 3 this whole thing again.
Yeah.
So everybody is familiar with the term confirmation bias, even if you don't know what it means, right? So here's my example. So everybody listening to this right now has bought a car at some point in their life. I'm pretty sure of it,
Yep.
right? And then when you're thinking about the car, when you're like shopping around, you're fine. But then the moment you buy the car, you realize that 46 other people in town have the same car and you've never seen them before. And the only reason you'd never seen them is because your reticular activating system wasn't tuned in to seeing those
Mm-hmm.
cars. And so they never existed before. And so another how of how this works is when you're tuned in to like making an extra $1 million a year and you tune into that frequency, what it does is it starts to change and open up your reticular activating system to start seeing the behaviors and the habits of a $10 million a year entrepreneur or a 1 million more. Just like when you
Mm-hmm.
buy the Honda Accord, you see 600 other Honda Accords and you never not see them again. You spot them in every
Yep.
parking lot, every airport, every boom. And then when you're like, oh, George, you bought the only Nardo Gray BMW M5 comp in the world, which I did, but then I saw every other Nardo Gray car. And I thought I had the special paint job. And then I realized Toyota ripped it off. And then Audi. And then I was like, wait, BMW stole it from Audi. And I was like, oh my God. Right. But then as I started to have an awareness that this thing existed, I started to see it all around me. And so that's also
Mm-hmm.
what's happening when you relinquish that how, when you start to stretch and you just ask what that next behavior is. And you just talked about it. So pragmatically, you're like, well, what would it look like? You take habit stacking, like, all right, this isn't about doing it perfectly. It's about me
Mm-hmm.
recognizing right now that I have 30 minutes and I could watch Netflix or I could try something new in my business. Let me try something. That
Yep.
behavior is what opens up that frequency because now you're seeing it differently because you chose a new behavior. And so the game is about constantly choosing those things. So I fucking love it, dude.
Yeah, I love that, brother. And anybody can. It's all at your fingertips. Like
It
anybody can
is.
use this any time of day, any day of the week. It's just like make the commitment. That's all it takes. It's just like literally break out of whatever small habit that you feel is not serving you, whatever one it is. You can pick and choose. Just try one little thing, and I promise you,
Mm-hmm.
you will start to see different things enter your field.
Yes. And it's crazy. The more you try it everywhere, the better, right? It's like, oh, I do 30
Yeah,
minutes of cardio, do 35. Or do
yeah,
30 but increase the speed 0.1 miles an hour, right? Like
yeah,
there's these moments that surround us everywhere in our life that if we're willing to take a bite, they will make us better at every opportunity. But it has to come from the fact that you really at the core have to understand that no matter what you consume, no matter who you look at, no matter who you hire for advice, nobody can do it for you. And
yep.
if you just started
If nothing,
choosing the behaviors and making improvements, a lot of the answers that you're looking will get answered without needing to hire somebody.
yeah. If nothing changes, nothing changes, bro.
That's it. So let's tell everybody about the book. We got like 3 minutes to land the plane. So what's the title of the book? Where can we get it? When the fuck
We're just
is
gonna
my
crash
coffee?
land this
When
motherfucker.
it? Would we do it any other way?
Nope.
Nope.
Your copy is going to be there soon. I just ordered some of the copies myself to send out to some dear friends. So that'll be coming pretty soon. But everybody else, right now, we're doing a promotion where we're have the ebook on sale for now until the end of the first week of sales, which will be, I think, May 21st is the end. The
Okay.
ebook's on sale for 99 cents.
Wow.
So you can pre-order that right now, get the ebook for 99 cents. And that's over at Amazon.com. You guys can go on your Amazon, find the ebook and put it there. And then that'll be officially, you will get that ebook on May 16th. That's the official published date. So yeah. And then obviously it's available if you want a physical book on Amazon as well, or Barnes and Nobles, Target, Walmart, all those places are going to be holding it. And the book is Design the Man Within. And yeah, it's great for men. Obviously, that's where my community is. That's where I'm really passionate about helping guys find that desired version of themselves so they can impact their lives better and everybody that is in their ecosystem. But for women, I don't just say this. I hate when people say like every book is for men and women. Like, no, some of them just kind of aren't. Like, some are really for women and some are really for men. Like, but this, I actually feel like I had my wife read it, and I've had a couple other women read it, and they actually felt very comfortable in the sense of just understanding what we're going through as men. Some of the conversations, because I don't hide it, guys. Sorry, spoiler alert. I'm going to let out some of your secrets. Like, I don't hide what the conversations are, the thoughts that some of us have that we're struggling with. And so it allows women to kind of see that so they can help their partner out better, or understand their partner a little better, maybe give them a little more grace, because I know as much as we want women to think that we're robots and, rock, we're not. So yeah, that's it, brother.
I love it. And then where is the book available? Amazon, where?
Yeah, Amazon, Barnes and Nobles, Walmart, Target, they all have it. We're trying to get focused on Amazon. So if you guys, that's where the 99-cent ebook is available. So if you guys want to get that, take advantage of it, it's over there.
Awesome. And then I'm going to do this. So for anybody listening, man or woman, for the first 50 of you that DM me your takeaway from this podcast, I will buy you each the 99-cent version. And so if Johnny wants to do the same, that's up to him, but that's my invitation. So my Instagram.
I will.
It's George Bryant. Johnny, what's your Instagram?
I will 100% do that. And
I know you will.
Mine is Johnny.Elsasser.
Can you spell it?
I can. It's I think so. I can read and write every once in a while. It's JOHNNY, and then .Elsasser is ELSASSER.
Awesome. I almost dropped an "aren't ready for Marines yet" joke when you said that one. I saved it till the very end. So Johnny's gonna match me. So listen, I would recommend picking a path. So either DM Johnny, and you can rewind this and get his Instagram and tell him your biggest takeaway from this episode, and he'll match. The first 50 will get the Kindle version, and then the digital version, and then the same thing for me. So DM me your biggest takeaway from this episode to It's George Bryant, and then I will do the same. And I should probably go prep my team for this one, so I'll tell them that.
Me too.
And I'm like, hey, yeah, we're gonna push this episode up, but we gotta get ready for this one. So here we go. But I love it, man. I love it, and I would recommend to everybody, men, women, combined, connect with Johnny on Instagram for sure. Everywhere you can find him, grab the book, go listen to other podcasts, check out his podcast. Where's your podcast?
The Art of Masculinity. And if you want a real special one where George just goes off the chain, go check out the episode that George and I have on there, because you can't tether George in, that's for sure.
I love doing podcasts with like brothers and people I love, because all you get is the real, like, unfiltered. I'm like, God, I'm home. I feel so safe. Let's go.
It's so good. It's so good.
All right, everybody. We're going to crash land this plane to be respectful of time, because Johnny has a PR meeting to sell said book that I'm currently encroaching on. But I will just ask him for forgiveness later, because I just take my own liberties. So here we go. So we're going to land the plane. So make sure you check out Johnny everywhere. Check him out on Instagram. Check out The Art of Masculinity. I will say that was one of my favorite podcasts I've ever done. Pretty raw, real, and honest about everything. Johnny also has been on this show. Find him everywhere you can. He's in my life. He's in my world. Him and his incredible wife, Taylor, if you're listening to this, I fucking love you. Make sure you check her out too. You'll find her tagged in all of his stuff. It looks like the goddess that holds him accountable.
She's
that
dope.
one. That's her. Yep, that's her.
Yeah, that's her. Yep,
so check her out. Check her out too. So Johnny, we'll do round 3 in person in Montana.
Absolutely, brother. We will put that on the books, and I am happy to do that. I love you, man.
I love you, buddy. All right, everybody. This has been another episode of the Mind of George show, crash landing in when an Army and Marine guy get together and work out their differences. We agree on a few things, that hard and fast is the only way. That is a very bad double entendre. But this has been another episode of the Mind of George show. Remember that relationships will always beat algorithms, especially the one with yourself. And if you want it better, get Johnny's book. And if you want to help the men in your life get it better, get Johnny's book. And so I will either see you in the next episode or you will hear me in your earballs. But either way, we are out. Yay!